And welcome everybody to another glorious episode of the Put on Raiders podcast. I'm your host Dwayne Douglas. Ryan Holmes and I will get after it with the Raiders here in a second. But don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Enjoy it. The Put on Raiders podcast. Let's see here. So let's go back. Let's take a kind of a look at some guys you'd want to bring back. So on defense, the defense has been. I think people will talk about the defense as if it's like really really good. They've had some flashes, but there are some players who I know you made a list of guys who you want to see come back to the Raiders, and obviously it depends on who the defensive coordinator is.
Yeah, obviously we'll start on the defensive side of the ball. They have a ton of free agents. I think for sure I would make an attempt to bring Robert Spillane back. I think he's the heart and soul of that second level. He's the green dot. He's shown more than capable to be a solid
Yeah.
starting linebacker in the NFL. It's good against the run. He holds up enough against the pass. He's not an elite pass defender, but for a guy that's going to be 29 years old, I think you bring him back on a 2-year deal if he wants to come back. We'll just go player by player here. Marcus Epps is a free agent. I would bring him back. Obviously, I would try a 1-year prove it deal with a lower salary with incentives to try to get him back. I'm not going to overpay to bring Marcus Epps back, but I think you've seen the communication on the back end has suffered when he's not in there. And I know that he's not going to be a big wow player when it comes to turnovers and forcing fumbles and just being a great guy in coverage. But I think you've seen the secondary struggle without him. So I would try to bring him back on the right deal. But like I said, I'm more than comfortable letting him go if another team wants to pay him coming off the injury and addressing that position in the draft or in free agency. Trayvon Merrick would be the priority of the two for me. I think Trayvon Merrick has shown the ability to cover. He's shown the ability to blitz. He's showing he's a playmaker when you put him down in the box, which is something we haven't seen a lot of him. He was more of a middle of the field free safety, but now you're seeing him kind of get down there. So he can cover tight ends. He's physical. Um, he's a pretty good open field tackler. I would do everything I could to bring Trayvon Merrick back, and I think he's going to have a pretty hefty payday. It's a pretty deep safety free agency class, so I think the Raiders don't have to overpay. But I think he's earned a 3 or 4 year deal. Um, I'm a
Mhm.
Nate Hobbs guy. I would bring Nate Hobbs back. I think he's physical. He's a tone setter. He's a very good tackler. He's not the best cover guy. You definitely need to play a lot more zone with him. If the Raiders want to go basically just be a man coverage team, which is hard to do in today's NFL, but if they want to do that, it's not really suit him. But if they're going to be a team that mixes coverages and play a lot of zone, I think that the Nate Hobbs definitely should be back. Again, I don't see a huge overpay. If you're talking $7 million a year, $8 million a year on a 3-year deal, I think you can do that. He has been hurt a lot, so that's something that maybe the Raiders don't give him a huge amount of guaranteed money in case he does get injured in the first or second year and they can get out of that contract. But he's definitely a priority for me as well. I think Adam Butler inside's a priority. He played on a 1-year, $1.8 million deal. Um, he's well surpassed that. He's a great teammate as far as setting up other guys. When you start talking about these TE or TT games, he's really good at doing the small stuff and taking blockers and getting into gaps and drawing attention. Even gets away with some defensive holding at times to allow guys to come free. And he's shown up in the run game. I know he's a little on the older side. He will be 31 next year. But I would do everything I could to give him a 2-year deal, and I'd probably bump him up somewhere in the $5 million range, give him a nice raise to bring him back. I just think he pairs very well with Crosby and hopefully the other guys they bring back on the defensive line. Malcolm Kuntz is another guy. Again, he's young. He's 26 years old.
Mhm.
He flashed last year over 8 games. He's got some pass rushing moves. He's got speed off the edge. Not the best guy in the run game, but if the Raiders are going to stick with a 3-4 defense, then definitely Malcolm Kuntz is a guy. And I think you can get him back on a 1-year prove it deal. Again, I don't think a lot of these guys are going to get long-term deals. But if you can get Malcolm Kuntz back on a 1-year, say $7-8 million deal, give him some nice sack incentives. Like if he gets to 10 sacks, throw a couple more $1 million at him, but make it worth his while. Because pass rushers are going to want to play opposite Max Crosby. So if he's on a prove it deal and he's like, hey, if can get to 10 sacks, I'm going to make a lot of money, be able to hit the market again after showing
Mhm.
that I'm healthy. There's no better place to do that than opposite Max Crosby, who's drawing double and triple teams. Um, Divine Diablo, I'd probably let him walk. I'd probably just let him go, try to fill that in the draft or free agency. The Raiders play a ton of big nickel the last couple of weeks. They're a big nickel team under Patrick Graham. I, I just I just don't see it with Diablo. I don't see the consistency. I see errors in coverage. He's not great run defender as far as the run fits. So like he'll have games where he flashes, and then he'll have games where you're wondering what's going on. This last week was one of those weeks against Tampa Bay, but. I'd probably let him go. The one name I haven't mentioned, and I was saving him for last, was K'Von Chaisson because I think Raider fans are falling to a deep love affair with him based on I think of the way I worded it for you. He beat a turnstile for a sack and a half last week against Kansas City. You haven't seen him consistently be able to get to the quarterback in his career. We can't overrate one game. We have to look at the totality of his career,
Mhm.
which now spans 5 years. Going to the season, he had five career sacks, and he has three this year with the Raiders. So we're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 games. He has eight sacks. That's not elite. He made a nice interception. I think he's a nice rotational role player. I'd like to bring him back. I would prioritize Kuntz as well as most of these other defenders before I bring back Chasen. I would definitely bring back Chasen over Snowden. But Chasen might have an opportunity to go out to the market and get some playing time somewhere else. I don't think he's going to be as in demand as Raider fans think. I don't think he needs a 2, 3, 4 year deal. I think it's another prove it deal if he wants to come back with some incentives,
Mhm.
somewhere in the $3 to $4 million range. There's a reason why he hasn't had a ton of production in his career up to this point. And again, he's rushing opposite Crosby. He's not seeing any double teams. We'll see if he can consistently beat better tackles over the last 4 weeks here. But I'm not just gonna. And I appreciate everything he's done. I'm just not going to fall for the he did it for 6 games. So let's throw a ton of money at him because the Raiders have a ton of other needs on this team. And I think like I said, I would prioritize Kuntz over him. Those are the most of the free agents. I know Darnay Holmes probably, if he wants a mid league minimum deal, bring him back. I think John Jenkins, with his age, he hit his level of play has slipped this year. Um, he's an older guy. He'll be 36 next year. I'd probably just let him go. And then there's some free agents like Janaris Robinson, I probably would let him go. He's a restricted rights free agent. He's not going to cost any money. Luke Masterson, restricted rights free agent, probably bring him back for whatever the minimum is to bring him back there. Isaiah Polamau, we mentioned earlier, he's a restricted rights free agent. I had big hopes for Isaiah Polamau. I just don't think that he's made enough plays to warrant pushing for a starting job. If he wants to come back and compete next year as a backup safety, then by all means I would do that. But again, I'm not moving on from Marcus Epps because I don't think Polymouth's shown enough to overtake that spot. And the rest of the guys here, like Matthew Butler, he might not. He'll be back for camp, but he's probably not going to make
Yeah.
the roster. Mwaga's probably not going to make the roster next year. So the Raiders have a lot of starters hitting free agency. I don't think any of them. I think Merrick probably and Spillane are the two priorities, and those two are probably the ones that, if they do hit the market, will get some money. But I don't think that they're going to get paid where it's going to be a problem for the Raiders to bring them back with the amount of cap space they have.
Yeah, so yeah, so it's a good list of Ryan's list of who comes back and who he thinks will come back for the Raiders who in 2025. We'll take a quick break and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the Tampa Bay game. Great game the Raiders played out there in Florida. All right, back on the Put on Raiders podcast. Ryan Holmes, Dwayne Douglas here. The Raiders lose again. With ninth straight now? 10
I
straight, ninth
lost
straight.
count.
I lost
It's
count.
nine. It's nine.
It's nine. So they lose again. Got in a hole. Kind of solidified the game. After they got out on the 14-0, I thought it was going to be like, it's going to be this the landslide game, and then they end up getting destroyed. But didn't happen. They held tough for a little bit, and then at the end, kind of gave it up. Kind of typical, same old thing we've been seeing all week. They give you flashes, but they're never going to be able to put together 4 quarters of football, and they end up losing the game and losing it pretty handily and almost get up 30 points again.
Yeah, I was. it was a tough game. Like you said, they fell down 14-0 early. Um, the defense for the first two drives didn't really show up. The Buccaneers went right up and down the field, made it 14-0 quick. But credit to the defense for holding tough there in the second quarter, getting three turnovers in the second quarter. The offense was able to punch one of them in, but I think we're seeing a lot of what we've seen. Like they'll have stretches where they show something. They got four sacks, but then they give up a couple third and longs. Jack Jones falls for the fake into the flat, the quick screen. The guy beats him down the field for a touchdown. I when I watch this team on this is going to be weird, but when I watch this team on all 22, and I watched about the first half of the defense, I haven't watched anything else yet, but I almost feel like they're the team that you bring in to play the Harlem Globetrotters, where the Globetrotters get out early, and then the other team makes a run to make it interesting for the fans that paid for the tickets, and then the Globetrotters win the game. Like that's kind of how I feel watching the Raiders this year. I don't know if that makes sense.
There's a lot of sense. I mean, they're really, I mean, listen, like I don't even know, there's no words for it right now. I mean, I think we know what we're watching here. And I think, like I said, the goal is to hopefully be the 2025 Commanders. Show, get the quarterback, show some progress. Maybe get lucky and win some games there and win some games. As you shouldn't have, a la the Hail Mary against the Bears. But like you just want to be able to kind of unite winning, get this fan base like kind of like not at each other's throats with a bunch of stupidity. Like I mean, they just need to show a direction for this franchise, and hopefully this offseason is one in which they can do that. Yeah, it's hard to watch. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, you just can't wait to see the second game of a doubleheader so you can see some good football. But for the most part, but I mean, it is what it is. I mean, this is what they are. I mean, when you go into a season and you don't take the quarterback position seriously, and you walk in there with Gardner Minshew and you walk in there with Aiden O'Connell, this is the results you're going to get. You're not going to get like really good football, folks. And this is what they were. No matter who the quarterback is, whether if you're an Aiden guy or a Gardner Minshew guy, you're going to get this kind of result because they're just not. This is not a good. It's not a good football team as far as the quarterback play goes. It's just not. It's just not there.
Yeah, Nate O'Connell had his come back to earth game, and I was on this podcast last week, and I said that the Chiefs all 22 wasn't as glowing as the stat line for Aiden O'Connell had. And we kind of saw that. We saw that this week, some inaccurate passes, some bad decisions, a terrible interception in the red zone, another interception that fortunately the ball hit the ground, so it didn't count. Um, just inability to get away from pressure. And then unfortunately he got hurt. Sounds like it's not a long-term injury, and there is a chance he may play against the Falcons and should be in line to play the week after that if he doesn't against the Jaguars. I will say this though, I keep hearing people talk about they need to be the 2025 Commanders. I don't agree with that because I'll say this: the Commanders are in a division where they have the Giants and the Cowboys that have been terrible this year. The Raiders won't have that luxury next year. They're going to be facing the Chiefs, the Chargers, and the Broncos. By all accounts, should be very competitive teams next year. They're not going to be in a division that's going to allow them to fight for second place. I think next year, even if they get the quarterback and the head coach right, because I don't think this defense has all the right pieces yet to be a dominant defense. I don't think a rookie quarterback's going to carry this team to the playoffs. I know we all want this team to be a playoffs team next year, and I think that's the problem with Raider Nation is they think every year they need to be in the playoffs. They've never built this thing right from the ground up. Like the Raiders go get the quarterback, get the other pieces. If they win 5 or 6 games next year, but they show progress, that's great. It's not a failure if they don't make the playoffs next year with a rookie quarterback. So I don't want to put all the baskets in. They have to be the 2025 version of this or that. And then like I just don't see that being feasible. I don't think this is a playoff team next year, even if you go out and you hit on the quarterback.
I mean, for me, when I say that, I mean in the sense of just showing progress, like
Yeah.
just showing progress. Not, I
If
mean,
they win 7 games next year with their rookie quarterback, that's great. As long as they're
that's
going in the right direction.
and that rookie quarterback, whether it's Cam Ward, whether it's Shador Sanders, and they show progress, I can live with the the number of wins. You know what I mean? Like but they have to. You can't when you're sitting there with Mahomes. You're sitting there in a division with Herbert. You're sitting there with Bo Nix. If Bo Nix is going to be a solid NFL quarterback, then it's just you're sitting there just like what are we doing if you're rolling in there with Mr. Turnover Sam Darnold or what you have right now. Like the stopgap stuff needs to stop. Like stop putting band-aids on an open on a gunshot wound. This is a gunshot wound. Like we gotta to go to the hospital, get it fixed the right way, and then and then as far as that, take your time and get it done the right way. I mean, you look at a division like the well with the NFC the AFC South. You got four good teams in it. Like once in a while, some of those even some of those good teams have up and down seasons, and then maybe you can make the playoffs. Maybe not in 25, maybe in 26 or 27. Like just show progress like we did. Like you know, the Carr era was not the best era, but at least they built a team in a way that was like going in the right direction. Carr just wasn't Carr just wasn't the star quarterback we needed him to be, right? So like you had defensive line, offensive line. They started drafting those guys. They started acquiring those guys through free agency, like Rodney Hudson, people like that. They started building the team the right way. They took a quarterback, and then it played out, and it looked like from 2014 to 2016 that it was going to be something special. It kind of flamed out after he got hurt against the Colts. But at the very least, we took the chance and we saw what it could look like. Let's just see what it looks like again, and this time let's not wait 11, 12, or 10, 10 years to know that the guy is not the guy and still keep paying him and still keep it on the roster. Like you just can just go ahead and after 2, 3 years, if he's not the guy, you just move on.
I'm old enough to remember 2014 when they started 0 and 10. So we've
Yes,
seen
exactly.
bad starts to new regimes, but they did turn it around. They won 12 games in 2016. So it is possible. I will say this: I've seen a lot more pushback on the don't take a quarterback in the first round, take in the second round. There's a reason why I reposted that list of every quarterback taken the second round for the last 20 years. And some guy responded today, well, three of those guys went to the Super Bowl, which you can't argue that. Three of the 21 did, but two of them were with the 49ers and Garoppolo and Kaepernick, and either one of them was a long-term answer, and they were both gone very quickly, obviously for different reasons. Um, and the third guy was Jalen Hurts, who has a chance to be a franchise quarterback, but he's carried by one of the best rosters in the NFL, which the Raiders are nowhere near that. So it's a very small number. None of those guys have won a Super Bowl. And I don't think the criteria for a franchise quarterback should be, did they win a Super Bowl? Because if that's the criteria, it's not a very long list.
Yeah.
You can be a franchise quarterback if you're with a team for 10 to 15 years. You're constantly in discussion for the playoffs. You make the playoffs for consecutive seasons, 4, 5, 6 out of 8 years, and you're constantly give yourself a chance. That's all we're asking for. We don't need to have a Hall of Fame quarterback. We'd love to have one. I would sign up for a Hall of Fame quarterback right now because I haven't seen one in my lifetime with the Raiders. So, and the other thing I want to point out is, and I know people say, well, take the best player available and then take the quarterback in the second round. Well, I just told you the quarterback in the second round, they're basically as bad as the hate rate is in the first round, it's 20 times worse in the second round. And if the playoffs started today, 11 of the 14 teams have a first round quarterback. And last year, 7 of the 8 teams that went to the divisional championship had a first round quarterback. So the way to do it is a first round quarterback and build the roster. Once you're not paying the quarterback anything, build the roster around that. But just because you take a guy to different position doesn't mean there's no bust rate there either. The Raiders have a long history of not taking a quarterback and a long history of busts in the first round. Now, did they overdraft some of those guys? Yes, but it doesn't mean if you take, let's just say, for this argument, let's just say the Raiders pick fifth and the quarterbacks are gone, the top two guys are gone, and Travis Hunter's gone. And then what do? You have to have another plan of action. It doesn't mean you force a quarterback at 5 just because you do there. It also doesn't mean you just take the best player available at 5. If the best player available at 5 is a tight end, you don't take him. It won't be in this scenario, but you have Brock Bowers in that scenario. So is it corner? Is it defensive tackle? I would probably lean Mason Graham and go defensive tackle at that point. We're a long way from that. Once the draft order is set, we'll have a better idea.
Mhm.
But I love this notion that if you pass on the quarterback because the hit rate's 50%, but you just take any other position, you're getting a Pro Bowler. So just take the other position. That's the
Oh,
furthest from the truth as well.
that has not worked for the Raiders. And
That is not.
that has not worked for the Raiders. Raider Nation, don't be scared. Don't be scared. I understand. I understand. Like people feel like it's weird because people like Tyree, people like Ruggs, people like whoever first round flop the Raiders have.
Leatherwood, Arnett,
Leatherwood, Arnett,
Farrell,
Farrell. Keep going.
Michael Huff.
Keep going.
I can go down the whole list.
Yeah, yeah. But the thing about it is they
Matt
can
Stinchcomb was a safe pick. How'd that work out?
exactly Robert Gallery. But like let like those guys can hide, right? You know what I mean? Like those guys can hide. When it's a quarterback and he touches the ball every single play and he flops, it's hard to hide it, right? I mean, so it's like I guess some fans feel like almost embarrassed by it. You shouldn't like even though like the Joe Douglas had some really good drafts with the Jets,
Never
but
picked a quarterback
but
or
but
got the
he
right one.
but he failed to get a quarterback. He failed to get a quarterback and he ended up losing his job. Like you have to get the quarterback right. All this whole build a roster thing is it's just like it just makes it just you can do both. You can walk and chew gum, guys. You can get a quarterback and still build a roster. Those two
The, the,
those things don't have to be separate, Ryan.
I look at it this way: if you have a chance to take the quarterback, take him.
Yes.
It to me, I get it. Shador Sanders, Cam Ward, if they were in last year's draft, they wouldn't be as high as some of their guys, which is why we were screaming to the rooftops last year to do whatever it took to take one of those
Yes.
guys, and the Raiders failed to do it. This is why, because these two guys, whether no matter what you think of them, I wouldn't put them over the top three last year for sure.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't put them over Penix just because of the arm strength that he has. I was a JJ guy, but I would kind of put him in that area.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you don't take them because what if you're wrong? What if they turn out to be better than you thought? And then they do turn out to be that guy that you can build your team around for the next 12 to 13, 14, 15 years. You just do it because if you build the roster first and you're always picking and you're not making the playoffs because you don't have a quarterback and you're picking like the Raiders have for the last God knows how many years. If you're picking somewhere from 9 to 15 and you just can't get up there to get those top elite quarterbacks, then you're just this hamster in this wheel that's running in circles and you're never getting the right position right. Quarterback is the most important position in football. Um, Take the chance. It's never been more important to have a quarterback than it is now, and it's never been easier to move on if you're wrong than it is now. Just keep taking swings until you get it right. We don't care if you get a solid right tackle if you had a chance to get a solid quarterback because a solid quarterback is worth 10 times more than the solid right tackle in terms of value to a franchise.
And Bo Nix right now is just being solid. He's not being like superstar, like oh my God, like Josh Allen. Like
If
he's go ahead.
if you put Bo Nix's stats up next to Caleb Williams' stats, they're pretty similar. The
Yes.
only difference is Bo Nix is winning and Bo Nix is playing with a top five defense. Um, their stats are very identical.
Very identical. Yeah, and the whole thing, yeah. Is everything, QBR, everything. So like, yeah, I mean, I don't know what the embarrassment is. I don't know if somebody has like a Todd Marinovich picture on their wall when they're young and they're mad that he didn't turn out good and or same thing with Jamarcus Russell, but it's just time, Raider Nation. We gotta stop playing games. It's just time
Yeah.
as far as that goes.
My
Um,
argument is if you never want to take one in the first round until you get the one generational Andrew Luck, John
yeah,
Elway, or
you're not
Arch,
gonna be
whatever you think of Arch
yeah,
Manning, you have
yeah,
to be the worst team in the league in the right year for that to happen, which is
yes.
probably not going to happen. If you're not going to do it in the first round, and history says you're pretty much not going to do it in the other round,
Yeah.
and they never become available in free agency, and when they do, they're Kirk Cousins at 35, 36 years old, and you got to pay him 100 million guaranteed. How are you ever going to get a quarterback?
It's funny, like that question that what you just said is the question that I have posed to people on Twitter, and you have, and also on Twitter Spaces, and they don't have an answer for it, and I just don't understand. I don't understand like I don't understand like how you function that way as an organization. Well, there is a guy in the National Football League, Ryan, who is playing as bad as the Raider quarterbacks are, and his name is Kirk Cousins. I think he's had what I think he's had like 4 or 5 games, no touchdowns, 8 interceptions. He has been pretty god awful ever since e- ever since the streak has started. I thought maybe the bye week would have helped him, but he looks even worse in that time frame. Doesn't think I don't I mean he's getting paid too much money for them to go flip it and then start Penix. But Monday Night Football, Raiders, Raiders Falcons. What are your thoughts about how they match up with Atlanta and Kirk Cousins?
Yeah, I had a long conversation last week and then even yesterday with a Raiders fan who was messaging me about how he would bench Kirk Cousins. He's all in on Penix. He thinks Penix should play this game. And my counter argument to that is, yes, Cousins hasn't been great. He's throwing for a ton of yards. The turnovers aren't good. He's actually number one in the league in turnovers with 17, which is three more than Sam Darnold, who Raider fans want to bend over backwards and give a gazillion dollars to, but that's a story for another day. Um, but if you're in the Falcons management and you have a veteran quarterback and he has shown in the past that he can do it, they have they're one game behind Tampa for the division, and they have the tiebreaker on Tampa, and they still play the Raiders, the Giants, and I think the Cowboys. They have another bad team on their rosters. They have three winnable games. You can't bitch Kirk Cousins right now. You can't start a rookie when you have a chance to win the division, just because Cousins had a bad month. I don't think they're going to do that. I'm pretty sure. I even think the coach came out, and I was trying to explain that to a Raider fan who does listen to the show. Shout out to that Raider fan. He knows who he is. He sends me messages all the time. But I think the Raiders, if they have to go with Desmond Ridder, I don't think this is a good matchup for them. I think if Aiden O'Connell does find a way to play and he's upright and he can move it all, which he hasn't really done before,
Yeah.
I think the offensive line's been playing well enough. Um, I do think the Raiders are going to have problems matching up defensively with Drake London, because I don't think either one of their quarterbacks can match up with his physicality. I don't think they can match up with Kyle Pitts over the middle of the field because I don't think either one of their linebackers is great in coverage. And they're not great against the run. So if Atlanta just wants to turn around and hand the ball off to Bijan Robinson, and which is what I think they're going to do, they're going to try to run the ball with Robinson and Algier,
Oh, sure.
because they're not going to be afraid of the Raiders scoring points. So they don't need to put the ball in the air a ton. They don't need to risk it. They're probably not going to be playing from behind, so they can just kind of play field position, run the ball, wait for them to pop one, wait for the Raiders to do something stupid and turn the ball over and give them the ball in good field position. So, and then I do think Kirk Cousins still, for everything that he's done, if it comes down to a drive you need at the end of the game, they can still kind of lean on him and hit, like I said, Drake London. I think the offensive line has been kind of shaky there. Their defense, the pass rush isn't great, but I do think their safeties are pretty good. I think Jesse Bates has had a really good year. They still have AJ Terrell, who's a pretty good
Mhm.
cover corner. Um, so they're going to be able to kind of find a way if they double team and take Brock Bowers out of this game. Like if Jacoby Myers doesn't go off and if the Raiders can't run the ball effectively, and again, the Raiders are going to struggle to get to 20 points. If Desmond Ridder has to play in this game, they may struggle to get to 13 points.
Yeah.
So I think this sets up good for the Falcons to come in, establish the run, hand the ball to those two running backs. When you need to make a play, find Drake London, and just don't do anything stupid and just try to be the first team to get to 20 points, and they'll probably win the game.
And also with the you mentioned the Falcons schedule at the Raiders, home for the Giants, at the Commanders, home for home for Carolina. So they could
Carolina, yeah.
they could. I mean, like probably they're probably looking for 3-1 in those 4 games, but they could if they beat the Commanders or if they beat the Commanders, they could actually this schedule it could be a schedule where they do go 4-0. It's
If they
possible.
win out, they probably win the division
They
because
probably win the
Tampa,
division.
if Tampa loses one game, like Atlanta's beaten Tampa twice. I think that's the key here, and
Yes.
and why I would just stick with Cousins because you gave him all that money. You don't know what to expect if you just throw a rookie out there. I'm not throwing the season away to see what Michael Penix has for 2 or 3 games at the end when you have a chance to win the division and go to the playoff and
And,
host a playoff game.
and if you just get into the playoffs, again, you never know. Tampa was a play away from going. I mean, sorry, Tampa Bay was a play away from going to the NFC Championship game last year against Detroit. Like they were really that game was back and forth. And they had a really realistic shot to beat the Lions. So I would definitely look at that. I would think in this game, I mean, well, it's a different coaching staff, but players know Ritter. And Ritter in this situation, I could see them spamming a whole lot of Brock Bowers, although he didn't get a target until like 3 minutes into the 4 second quarter. It seemed like in the first game, but I don't see how they can stop the run game. Part of it is your biggest point that you brought up, and I totally agree with. Like if they come out and start throwing the ball all over the place, I'm gonna be like, what are y'all doing? Like if they just let them run the football, it's gonna be a problem for the Raiders. I mean, it's just gonna be a problem. Like they're gonna move the Raiders off the ball and be able to run the football right down their throats for the most part, and then the play action play. And I think the guys who are, I mean, you brought up Drake London, you brought up Drake London. Pitts is an enigma, whatever, but McLeod and Mooney have been really good for them on deep
Mooney's been
balls.
really good.
Yes, deep balls. So like so deep when you want to go over the top, they have two guys who can do that.
I do think too, and it's worth noting that Patrick Graham over the last, I want to say 3 weeks, he's called a cover zero blitz at a astonishingly high rate, something that he just hasn't really done a ton of in the past, and it's on film constantly over the last 3 weeks. So like the Raiders do that, and you get a ball down the field to Mooney or London. There's opportunities there. There were opportunities for Baker Mayfield on a couple of cover zero blitzes that I've seen on film already, where he had a guy wide open and he just was looking a different way post snap and just couldn't get rid of the ball or didn't see the guy open. So the Raiders are blowing coverages when they're going to these heavy blitz looks. They did the same thing against the Chiefs and left a few guys open. So if the Raiders continue to be aggressive like they have with some of the communication issues they've had on the back end, the Falcons could hit some balls down the field. But if I was Zach Robinson, I would just line up and run the ball, throw screens. The Raiders are going to give you the underneath stuff. I wouldn't take any shots down the field unless we dialed up a specific play for it. Matriculate the ball down the field. Don't turn it over. Don't put Cousins in a spot where he has to force throws into tight windows, because the Raiders will give you the underneath stuff all day. They'll give you screens.
Yeah.
They'll give you crossing routes. They'll give you stuff in the flat. Like the Raiders are just trying not to get beat over the top. So the smart teams are the ones that take the underneath stuff and run the football and just hold the ball for half the quarter, move it down the field and score a touchdown. And then once you get up by double digits, which every team the Raiders have played this year has done, the game's over.
Pretty much. Pretty much. Any final score? I almost had the score right. Off by 1 point this week. What are your thoughts about this one? I think 24. I think 24-10 is probably what I'm looking for the Falcons and Raiders.
I think the Raiders pass rush has come alive a little bit. I think that they have a little bit of juice right now. Um, I may actually end up going to this game. I haven't decided yet. But I do think playing at home, I'm not sure the Falcons fans are going to travel like crazy,
They're
like
not. They're not.
10 days before Christmas on a Monday night. So I do think there's going to be a nice Raider crowd for this game, even though it is on Monday night. I think people are going to get liquored up in the parking lot before the game. I do think that the team might come out, especially if Aiden O'Connell plays with a little juice early. I just haven't seen this team play for 60 minutes. We've seen it for 15 minutes. We've seen it for 20 minutes. We've seen
Mhm.
bits and stretches. I have a real hard time thinking they're going to score a ton of points. I think the Falcons figure out how to win this game like 17-13, something like that. I think it'll be real low scoring. I would take the under. I don't even know what the line is. I would just bet it, whatever it is.
Thank you for joining us here on the Put on Raiders podcast. Don't forget, USC fans, you can also join us here for the Student Body Right USC podcast, and also you guys who love quarterback play. And don't forget to tune into the Signal Caller, where Solo Lopez and I will break down all the quarterbacks here in the 2025 draft.